So playing devil's advocate and staying in that vein, when you have that individual who is, I'm right, they're wrong, right? We have them. We know we do,
Mhm.
and that's the stance that they're taking.
Yeah,
How do you break that down? What? Because essentially, what we have to figure out is how to actually get them to see it in a mirror for themselves. Because
sure.
talking at them really doesn't do any good. Because that just
Right.
makes them more and more talk to the hand. Because I'm right.
Yeah.
So we've got to get them to that place of seeing it for themselves. Uh,
Mhm.
what are some of the techniques, or how do you go about managing those situations like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where transformation and coaching really come into play. Um, I was trained by my coach in facilitating transformation, and she calls it the anatomy of transformation. And so when somebody's holding on, right, they're in the phase where they need to release. They need to release, right? And wanting to be right is a very strong desire. We have a very strong attachment to the need to be right. And so, with someone who's just like, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, they're in a stage of transformation where release could be actually liberating for them, that releasing that need to be right. In other words, releasing the illusion that they need to be in control and to help them see that. And so that might come about by asking them, what's the benefit of that for you, this need to be right? What's the cost of that for you? But asking the benefit of it, not necessarily from, not only from like, what do you get out of this, but how is it actually protecting you from something? And usually what I find is with that awareness, there's this deeper understanding of, oh, I actually now can see how this is limiting my performance, my success, my opportunities. And it can be very disarming. But some people are stubborn, and the ego likes to be right, right? And so that might happen over multiple iterations. But how is that working for you? Right? Like simply asking the question, how is that working for you? What's the cost of that? And getting them really present to the cost, the benefit, how it keeps them maybe safe or small. Um, and then moving them into a decision, like, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to keep holding on? Do you want to, do you have to cling to this need to be right? Do you want to repurpose that? Or are you ready to let it go?
It requires a lot of energy and effort, and I think
Yes,
that's something people don't realize how much energy and effort they're putting into that,
it
and just
does. It's
simply
exhausting.
it is, yeah, and redirecting that in a more positive way. The benefits are astronomical. But again, as you said, letting it go is one piece of it. So I want to stay in the same direction, maybe just switch lanes over one lane. And this goes to another thing that I know culturally is out there, and we hear a lot of talk about it, and that's toxicity and how different it could be people, it could be entities, it could be cultures have this toxic feel to them. Um, when you come across those types of environments or individuals or whatever it might be, how are you addressing the toxicity piece of it, and to try to get people more in alignment so that they understand and get away from what I call win lose. I
Mm,
only win when somebody else loses type mindsets. And
yeah. From a business perspective, I've been fairly fortunate to not come up against this very often. But I can speak to it from a personal perspective for sure. And I'm just kind of feeling into, when I first entered the workforce, I have a journalism degree, and so I went into the news industry. I worked for a newspaper. Um, I worked first for a weekly newspaper, and that environment was pretty okay. And then I went to a daily newspaper in the Boston media market. And so it's a little more high stakes, a little bit more competitive. And I didn't quite understand, these were the term toxic work environment wasn't really a thing. This is in the 90s. But I felt that. And like to the point where I was having panic attacks going into work, you know, and um, ultimately I decided like this isn't for me, and I just stepped out of it. And sometimes that's the answer, but when I look back, when I look back on it, I probably would have made the same decision. But at the time going through it, I really internalized that and personalized that, and felt like I was a failure. And it was probably the best decision that I made. Hindsight's 2020, right? And sometimes that's the answer. A lot of times that's the answer is you just step out. You step out. And sometimes that's not an option, right? Um, so we have to be really true to ourselves in moments like that. Some people might naturally be inclined to maybe call that out and call in, some healing around that. Some people might just want to run away. And I guess why I'm bringing up these different examples is because I want to normalize that doing what's best for you is something that you can trust, right? Not everybody, not every culture, not every person is going to want to change or heal or improve. And when that's clear to you, and when you're clear that that's not aligned with what you want for yourself and in your sphere, you can take empowered steps and make empowered decisions from that place. As far as like people who are wanting to, like, or maybe they're in a toxic environment, or they're wanting change within that environment, that's going to take some awareness, some probably some healing, right? Because toxicity comes from a place of pain and wounding, and not necessarily having the tools to heal that, right? And so leaders who are committed to change, and commitment is the key term here, right? A lot of times we say we want to change, but we need to be committed to doing the work for that change. And that's an important piece of how committed are you? Are you just saying this because you know that that's the appropriate thing to say?
That old saying of action speaks louder than words, right? It's
Right.
really that simple.
Yeah.
You mentioned something in that really rang with me, and that's, you're talking about trust, and you brought up the word trust. From a transformational, transforming yourself standpoint, how important is trust? And to drill that down one more level, how important is self trust in that?
Yeah. Oh, I think we need another show for that. That one's deep,
Absolutely,
right?
right.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. We talk about trusting others a lot, right? But when you trust yourself, that's actually when you unlock something, because it becomes less about outsourcing that trust. Like, oh, I don't trust that person. Okay, but that's something within you. I'm not saying that maybe there isn't evidence of hey, I shouldn't trust this person. But when you're in line and attuned to your self trust, and you trust yourself, that's, instead of kind of looking outside yourself for people to be trustworthy, that's a different place to be. And so I would say self-trust is huge. Right? But a lot of us have learned not to trust ourselves. And so there may be some work that needs to happen in order to rebuild that trust with yourself.
And then that's obviously wrapped up in when things don't go right or you have a failure and different things, you start to overthink,
Hmm.
self bash a little bit, just from the standpoint of, well, I made a poor choice. Now I don't trust myself when I'm in that similar situation again, have to make another choice.
Hmm.
But the realization there is that when you are taking a risk, that is what it's called. It's a risk, and
Right.
it's not always going to go as you thought it might, and starting to just get comfortable with that, and spending less time here just bouncing it around and going back and forth, and actually taking, as we just said a little bit ago, that next action step to start to try to move you forward. Again, didn't say it was easy.
It's data, it's information too,
Right.
right? And we don't have to necessarily jump to the conclusion that we no longer can trust ourselves. We can reframe that, right? Well, I took a risk here, didn't work out the way I thought it would or the way that I wanted it to work out. What did I learn? What did I learn from this? And how do I want to carry that learning forward? And so that moves us more into a space of curiosity versus sort of judging ourselves or even judging others, right? Because sometimes it's other people are taking risks and we're like, oh, that was dumb. It's a very human thing to do, right? But if you have a process for, and a lot of businesses do, they have debriefs. They distill the learnings from their initiatives, and I feel like that's a process that can really help take the, not that emotions aren't important, but help kind of take the any sort of charge around it out of it and say, let's alchemize this. Let's figure out what the learnings are here. And then try again, try again from a different angle or just try something different altogether.